Welcome everyone to our presentation today, To AI or Not to AI, a business guide for profitable growth. I'm your host, Chris Templeton, and we're really excited to have you all here. We're looking forward to being a real value to you and coming to terms with the expanding world of AI. There will be no sales pitches today, instead an informative discussion with leaders that have spent more time with AI than most of us. So let me start by introducing our panelists. First is Arzu Barske. She's a senior manager of go-to-market business automation at IBM. She's known as the big data lady and has been involved with AI healthcare research. And at IBM, she's the practice lead for business automation for process and operational excellence. She's a digital transformation and digital business strategy exec level advisor. Next is on our panel today is Pedro Paiva. Pedro is passionate about driving business value through digital business transformation. To start with strategy and business aspects, considering executive engagement, stakeholders, and change management, before addressing technology, possibly enabled IoT services and enhanced by AI. He likes to work on the following impacts: better service KPIs, improved customer experience, operational climate. He also likes to work on new revenue streams with new services and business models, and transformation of products as a service. He also focuses on transformation of products into services, product as a service, or XaaS, which can be applied to all industries, bridging strategy and innovation, business people, and technology. Next is Matthias Duro. Matthias has always worked at the intersection of technology and innovation, from infrastructure to cloud, platforms, data, and AI. He's the Global Chief Commercial Officer of Omina Technologies, who focus on yielding true and effective business outcomes with AI. He believes in pragmatism, removing the hurdles between theoretical and real-world impact, and making sure you have an effective innovation strategy in place. He's focused on your desired business outcomes, which include people, process, and technology. Highly specialized and trustworthy artificial intelligence, lawful, explainable, and ethical. They support the use of AI for business outcomes in regulated industries while respecting privacy, regulatory requirements such as those dictated by GDPR and the upcoming EU AI Act. He also focuses on health and mental health and believes in the impact of entrepreneurship and working with purpose. Thank you for being here, Matthias. Welcome Sergio Van Looyk. He is the managing partner of CapExpand Partners. He specializes in supporting cross-border growth initiatives with innovative financing solutions, including business acquisitions and exit strategies. He works with business leaders to fine-tune their strategic financial business planning with AI innovation, to raise capital using AI to match investors to investment opportunities, and to provide actionable insights during target identification and screening. Sergio began his career with Leonardo and Company, which later merged with Rothschild in Belgium. He has held significant roles such as Director of Corporate Development at both Bavaria and Umicore. And Sergio is a sponsor of this event with CapExpand Partners. And finally, I'm your host, Chris Templeton, and I'm with Influence Spotlights, and I'm really pleased you're all here. Let's talk about the structure of the event. We're going to look at whether AI is right for your business. How can your organization assess whether AI aligns with your operational and strategic needs? How can your organization identify specific needs where AI can provide innovative solutions, and assess their readiness for AI integration in the pursuit of a competitive edge? Next, we'll look at strategic planning with AI and how AI is impacting executive decision-making and enhancing traditional strategic planning? And can it provide mechanisms for effective monitoring of a strategic plan and assist in the dynamic decision making, especially with unforeseen changes? Finally, we'll be looking at identifying use cases and how an organization can identify and adopt high impact AI use cases to their current business models and industry specific needs. Okay, let's get rolling. First of all, let's talk about the value of AI and looking at where we are and where we're going in terms of assessing AI alignment with operational and strategic needs. Sergio, how can people holistically and strategically get a solid point of view with AI?
Thanks for that question, Nicholas. I think, and also in terms of the structure of today's webinar, my background is in finance, M&A, raising capital. So I tend to look at businesses from a kind of a more of a holistic perspective. My counterparts, my clients are typically decision makers and other business leaders. So the focus areas for me personally, and especially when it comes to AI, is on a kind of C-level kind of executive types of decisions, and let's call them kind of second order impact and effects of AI, rather than focusing really on specific disciplines or job functions such as HR or finance or operations. So for me, really my kind of contribution here today is going to be very much more on strategic financial planning, how you can use AI, what are the trends that we're currently seeing in the markets, and also from an M&A perspective, what types of investments are we seeing?
Excellent. When it comes to methodology and business prioritization and understanding how people process technology, Pedro, how do we go about looking at AI as a part of this function?
So, as I said, I tend to look at the strategy first, and technologies come at the end. So for me, AI is not different, although there's a lot of hype about that, but really look at what are you trying to achieve as a business, what's your strategy, and then go into elements of whether it can help with automation, with productivity. That's what we're seeing a lot with news around generative AI. But also there's a lot of models that can go into predictive maintenance, those kinds of things. So once more, not different from AI, we should take a step back. So it's important to understand the capabilities of AI in general, and also the new ones coming out of generative AI. But let's not get bogged down. Let's not do similar mistakes that might have been done to an area close to me, which is IoT services, where people were generating IoT networks and then saying, oh, what can we do with that?
There was a study about the generative AI explosion that 79% of startups mention it were not using it at all. What is the story with where we are from that standpoint, from your perspective, Pedro?
So that's a study that was made actually prior to Gen AI. So this was, if we can call it like that, the vanilla AI, which has been going on for decades now. Since the 60s, AI has been growing and evolving and being developed. So there's a lot of hype and marketing. And yeah, the study was saying that 79% of the startups, when done some sort of due diligence, had no AI whatsoever. I don't want to guess what it is with Gen AI now, but I see more and more at least startups claiming that they are doing things with AI. I'm not able to say whether that 79% ratio has increased or not. I hope it has decreased and people are really doing stuff with AI, hopefully for the good of the humanity.
And I think the thing that is important to me in terms of our pre-discussions is your focus on it being about people first, process. What are the drivers before we move to technology? Is that right?
Indeed. So I actually, and I did not invent the concept, but for me, the A in AI is augmented rather than artificial. So how can it augment the human, us, all of us, to be better or have less of let's say, the tasks that we don't like to do, and have more time to enjoy life in the parts that we like to do.
Gotcha. Arzu, are you there? I don't see you. I want to make sure we still have you.
Okay. Yes, I'm here. Yes.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
What do you see as the high-level purpose for implementing AI within an organization? How would you?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for the question. So first of all, the opinions and the comments that I will have, they are very personal, so I don't represent my employer, just to be clear on this. I think for last couple of decades that we have been talking about AI, and having AI as an additional process, let's put it this way, not just the technology or the people, but as a process somewhere in our roadmap in the organizations. But now I think we are moving forward to AI plus period. That's how we call. So the companies and organizations that will actually effectively put AI in their core of their processes, they will really benefit. So what does this mean? So not to see AI just like, oh, I should have this because it's trending, or I should hire a couple of young talents because I don't know what it's about. So this should not be the case. We should put AI in the center of our organizational strategy, and then look for the benefits. How can AI make us actually competitive in the market? So I can say those two are the most important part of this holistic AI approach. So if we go with the same mentality that we have been going for last decade, so I'm afraid there would be some failures and some disappointments on board, actually, in the companies and boardrooms, and also as well as by our young talents that we are hiring. So there should be a consecutive, very effective strategy in place, and the AI should be centered. But that, yeah, this is the way that I see.
Thank you. Matthias, let's talk about a little bit more about people and process. You've got a couple of additional dimensions that you'd like to bring to the table. Would you talk about those?
Yes, absolutely, Chris. And thank you for raising it. We're currently talking, and this part of the structure of the event is mentioning the value of AI. And so what I would like to do is just double click a little bit on the most important word in that sentence, the value of AI. The most important word in that sentence is value. Right? This event is titled "To AI or Not AI." You could also transcribe it saying "To succeed or not to succeed," because what you care about is, can I effectively improve? Can I make advancements? Can I make progress as a company towards the goal that I want? So that's the first dimension that I would like to inject here is that AI is not a goal on itself. It's a means to an end. Right? You always want to start, as Pedro and Atsu clearly articulated, you want to start from your business objectives. You really want to understand, where do I want to go as a company? What are my financial, my business, my market objectives, but potentially also my environmental, my societal, my sustainability objectives. Where do I want to go? Or where am I suffering? Where do I see pain points? What are the problems that I would like to see solved? And then really care about what's a change in the impact that I would want to make. And artificial intelligence is, coming back to what Artsu mentioned, it's a tool in the box. We literally had the experience with a customer that came to us with a problem statement, and we solved it for them. And then in the end, they said, hey, it's marvelous. We're saving about 3 FTEs or man days a week. It's fantastic. It's working perfect. But I would have liked to see a little bit more of advanced AI being used. And you used basic models. And that's pretty typical about people who are focusing on the technology and not the solution itself. But then I would like to double click and make it a bit more tangible, because so my message is start with your objectives first, really look at what you want to achieve. And then there's a recipe, and the recipe that I always use, again, I didn't invent it, but people, process, and technology. What's the recipe to actually obtain value from AI within your organization? On the people level, you want to make sure that your stakeholders effectively adopt the technology. If you put in place the most sexy and fancy and advanced neural network or technology, but it doesn't drive an effective change in your operations, you have wasted a lot of time and dollars. So you want to make sure that you generate ambassadors, sponsors that can stimulate this change management from you. So on a management perspective, you want to make sure that your users are effectively motivated and incentivized to adopt the technology. On a technological level, that translates to using artificial intelligence that's explainable, that's understandable, that's digestible by humans. So you basically remove the anxiety and the fear by making them a part of the solution. I am part of this. I understand why the AI is presenting something. I can have an impact on this. So that consolidation is an important element. On the process side, so that's the people side. On the process side, what's very important to obtain maximum value of AI is, I always use this saying, is just fry one fish and don't try to boil the ocean. Most organizations have this big dream about, we want to become a data-driven organization, so we're going to change all our processes, and they invest a lot of dollars in making the perfect world. But the ideal strategy is that you try to generate one small win. Generate some ambassadors, create an easy to obtain win with AI, show the results, get ambassadorship, and focus more. That gives you a financial yield because you will yield benefits, but it also has an organizational impact in the sense that people see that there's success and they come on board. And lastly, very quickly on the technology, it's last in the list. You want to make sure that the technology that you adopt is really suited to support the objectives that you identified. So you analyze your organization and then choose the technology that actually fits your objective. So that's just something that I wanted to add. And then as a small side comment, when we talk about value of AI, a very important reflection that I want to give to the audience is most people look at AI as either the big new thing that could revolutionize and disrupt industries. And the second dimension that I want to utter is that it's important to look at the transformative and innovation character of AI, but at the same time also understand that AI has risk, and that as you innovate, you need to manage the risks at the same time. So those were just a couple dimensions, Chris, that I wanted to add.
I'm going to go off script just a little bit. I want to talk about two things. When you look at managing risk, give the audience a sense of the types of risks that you've seen and how those can be managed, Matthias.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for double clicking on that question. So it's important to understand that as soon as you introduce AI, you by design introduce risk. When you're using automated processes, you're touching on data, there are several risk types that appear. You might introduce privacy risks. You might introduce compliance, legal liability, and financial risks. Your company might induce reputational risks. I can name a few. Probably most of the audience have heard about this, but the Cambridge Analytica Facebook scandal has been very out there. There's an insurance company that used AI and then was boasting on their website that they had a really intelligent algorithm that helped them to deny claims. And they really got a huge backlash from their audience. There's a legal risk. IBM and Amazon have had some challenges with discrimination in some of the tools that they have pushed forward. So the risk types can be, privacy, legal, ecological, societal, and financial legal liability risks. So those are just some of the types of risks that you might introduce. Me and my company were very active in regulated industries, healthcare, life sciences, banking, insurance, where there's a big trend towards more personalized, continuous, and proactive service delivery, meaning we need to use more data and also more sensitive data. So how do we do that while respecting privacy of our users? Those are some of the trade-offs that we need to make. And then coming back to the second question, how do you manage that? That's of course a whole chapter in and on itself. But right now, I would just say that if you look at the market today, you can divide it into two sections. There's a section of the market that's looking at AI innovation. There's AutoML software, MLOps software, tooling that allows data scientists and businesses to generate AI models to do productivity increases, revenue gain, risk mitigation, or what have you. But it's very important, coming back to my previous comment, that at the same time, you want to look at the risk management of AI. How can I ensure that I'm respecting privacy, that my solution is not breaching any ethical rules or discrimination rules? So you want to integrate the process of innovation with your process of risk management, and then make sure that those are coming into one integrated life cycle.
Thank you. For Arzu and then for Pedro, let's talk also and expand a little bit more on Matthias's point about the value of people, how important people are in terms of ambassadors and carrying that torch. Arzu, what's your sense of how to make that happen in a way that is helpful and not hurtful?
Yes, well, there are two components in this: the fear management in the organizations, because this is kind of the station always has been going on with every new technology or the digital transformation component that came along. So people have fears when it comes to artificial intelligence. That's one. And how do you manage this? And second, indeed, how could you spot your evangelists? How could you spot your sponsors in your organizations, your influencers? So this can be done in multiple ways. Of course, then there are always those people who are very excited to try out the new technologies or the new developments in the market. So I think that's very easy to spot in your organization, usually. Okay? But the most important part is finding the executive sponsors, because any investment that you are going to do, you need a budget, basically. For every innovation that you are going to trigger, you are going to initiate, you need a budget. So this is the downside of the story. When it comes to any innovation topic, it's very difficult to address the budget within an organization. So this executive sponsorship, in particular from the boardroom, is very important. So if you look at an organization, for example, if you have an industry in oil and gas, or any industry in like logistics, FMCG. So if you're delivering any B2B solutions, let's put it this way, maybe this is a much more particular example. If you have B2B solutions and you are selling some services, so if you make the component AI or engineer, actually, part of the services that you are selling out in your contracts for your clients, if you integrate this in your KPIs, so you will probably get the most out of the transformation within your organization, because once it's part of the KPI, so you can actually monitor, you can actually book the results, and the topic would be taken much more serious within your organization. So these are the three ways that I look at it, actually. So look into your young talents, look into your executive sponsorships, and look in how you can integrate these new technologies within your B2B services if you are active in that kind of market. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe Chris, if I may add
Pedro?
there.
Oh, sure.
yeah.
Go ahead, Sergio.
Yeah, so at our firm, the way we implement it is threefold. We look at the AI market space, we implement it in strategic financial business planning, and we help our clients with exactly that. So we use AI in different areas, and the way, I like to kind of use analogies, and the way that I understand it is, as a business leader, just imagine for a second that your organization is like a sprawling garden, right? That not all plants, they require the same amount of care. And similarly to how business owners have varying degrees of needs as far as their operations are concerned, right? Especially those with repetitive tasks. Let's just call them weeds in your garden. Okay, so and that's coming back to the earlier point that you're raising in terms of value. In a study by Ansana, 62% of knowledge workers actually admitted that they were working on mundane tasks, right? So I think this is a low-hanging fruit, and I will cover into more kind of high-impact use cases later. But imagine AI as this skilled gardener coming in with tools that can help you identify and basically manage those weeds. But before you let this gardener into your garden, as a business leader, you want to determine which patches in your garden are most overrun, right? So these can be bottlenecks, repetitive tasks. They can be areas of inefficiencies in different processes. And once you've identified those patches, do you then bring in, and that's what Matthias and Archer are saying, do you bring in a specialized gardener, i.e. a custom tool, or do you bring in a general gardener, i.e. a off-the-shelf tool? So, even the best gardener needs guidance, and I think that's at the end of the day what we're also saying is that training and management of change management in this analogy is key, because you don't just want to let an external gardener come in, right, without knowing what it is that you want to achieve and how you want your garden to look like in the end. Okay, so that's a way of looking at this in a simplified way.
Yes, actually, I can add one point on this. Like, I think what is most important is, where do you want your company to stand over 3 or 5 years based on this future strategy? And then you need to look at with reverse engineering mindset. I am here and I want to be here. So how can I close the gaps within the help of technology or the process optimization? So, and what are your goals actually? Do you want to increase your EBITDA, or would you like to reduce your costs, or you need to manage your talents, or is it talent transformation, or is it a migration, or is it the customer or products and services that you are serving for? So there are all these different components, different factors. At the end, it's not very different than a typical conversation that we always held about digital transformation. Probably our audience is familiar with. It's a transformation, but it's a transformation which you need to focus better, because it's an unknown area for many organizations. It's something really new. And the first question is like, what do I want to achieve over how many years of program? And then how I need to achieve. So, but that's it. So I don't want to hijack the stage. So sorry. Yeah.
Pedro,
Yeah.
let's move on to the question around, we've heard a lot about AI really for quite some time, but now we're into generative AI and creating data from a base. Talk a little bit about where we're headed that way, would you?
So indeed, what I was calling the vanilla or the classical AI or the overall AI has been existing for decades. It's been used to analyze data on events that have happened, and now generative AI, as its name implies, is generating stuff. Yeah. Of course, we already talked about productivity increase, automation. It also allows personalization because as it is faster, we've seen in the Salesforce, for example, I have no links with them, but they announced last summer that it was all about AI, data, and CRM, which is normal for them. But they took this approach of still personalizing their messaging with the opportunity for whomever is using their software to validate. I think it's also an important aspect to validate the information that is sent to a customer. If we talk about the dangers of that, is it may be the lack of validation, having a black box, providing information that is not sourced. So perhaps we'll have an opportunity to define open and closed large language models, for example, because it's true that it all seems like very automatic, close to human, thanks to natural language processing, for example. But in the end, it's just a machine working on probabilities, in particular with the GPT models. So there are dangers associated with it. You don't change the garbage in, garbage out, it's still valid. So if you're collecting data on the plain internet and you're not able to identify, that's quite dangerous. But on the contrary, there's companies that are creating or populating their own models. So they know what they're putting in, and it's internal information, and then it personalizes and automates and increases productivity.
Excellent. Thank you. What we're going to do is go off script again a little bit. What I'd like to do is have you, Pedro, talk a little bit about open and closed systems. And then Matthias, I'd like you to give a little bit more insight based on your experience with government regulation and that sort of thing. So Pedro, talk about the difference between an open and a closed system, please.
So the idea is that you would have a company, let's say, a group of lawyers, for example, and they have junior lawyers or jurists that answer to customers, and very often the questions are similar, or if there are basic questions, and then the more experienced lawyers are used for the more complex cases. If they create and populate a closed model or a private model, if you will, they will collect the data internally as they have been doing for the last decades, but just more efficiently. And that it will create the model, it will become more and more, again, still with the idea of augmented. So I'm not talking about automated responses to customers yet. And I have doubts whether they should ever be. I often call AI also automated or augmented imbecility when I see some silly answers from some call centers. Yeah, I like to play with acronyms. So that would be a closed model, Chris. An open model.
Okay, Pedro, you told me this story once in terms of how you actually test whether you're talking to AI or not.
Yes. So I sometimes use some rude words to see if in the hopes that if it is being automated, it will be kind of flagged for a human to look at it. Yeah, that's a good one, Sergio, indeed. I had a Swiss bank the other day that didn't like that very much. And I was not being very polite. I just used one word, but And then in opposition to that, an open model would be, for example, AWS, Microsoft Azure, or Google Cloud, or whomever for that matter, that creates a model and is saying, oh, this should be applicable to either this industry or just very generic information on that area, but you don't know what's in. So yeah, you need to be very careful about that, because you don't know what the magic of probability or probabilities will create, and you will be signing for that in the end. So,
you know, Matthias, one of the things I'd also like you to touch on in regards to this is validation. I mean, one of the things that strikes me is throughout this conversation, we keep coming back to the importance of the human in the equation, right? And you know, we don't want automated imbecility. Talk a little bit about how you have dealt with that at your company.
Chris, just quickly double checking, you're talking specifically about Gen AI, or in general, is your question oriented at the validation and adoption for the effective output of AI, ensuring that there's no risks, etc.?
Can we go with both?
We can do both. But see, what's interesting is that your maybe let me structure this response into the business side and then the more risk/regulatory side. When it comes to validation, and I really like, Chris, that you use this word as part of the question, and bringing it back to Pedro's very clear narrative about open and close LLMs. Validation is crucial in the sense that there's a guiding principle that says, I'm trying to translate this in my head, but it says, primarily do no harm, right? You want to make sure that you improve your business processes, improve productivity, reduce costs, but you mainly want to make sure that if you employ an AI solution, that no harm is done. And that harm can be defined as any type of risk. So putting that in the bucket of business validation, I come back to sort of the aspect of change management, something that we employ when we do innovation consultancies and we guide companies through the adoption of artificial intelligence, again, as a tool to reach their objectives, is really the human in the loop. And we always refer to this as gradual automation or gradual implementation, in the sense that you want, in the beginning, you don't want to just, hey, now there's 15 FTEs doing a certain job, we're just going to replace them with AI. No, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you augment or facilitate the process. And in the beginning, you might automate 20% of the work. And just the very obvious tasks, the very easy ones. And the ones that you have less confidence in, you might want to flag them to a user and say, hey, this is what we think. Do you validate a yes or no? So like a green check mark or a red cross. Do you say yes or no? And if no, why not? And that way, on the one hand, you bring your stakeholders on board in, I'm supporting this initiative, I'm part of this growth. And on the second hand, you make your system become more intelligent, more real world awareness. That way, the automation can be done in a more intelligent way. So I would say that's more about the human in the loop, human validation. By the way, human oversight is one of the key fundamental principles of trustworthy AI, and one of the fundamental principles on which the upcoming EU AI Act legislation will be based. So having humans in the loop, having human validation, understanding the input of different stakeholders in the beginning of the process and documenting in the end is no longer optional. It will be a legal requirement. That's on the business side. Quickly touching on the regulatory side of things, when we talk about validation, I mentioned a couple of times in this call that next to focusing on the innovation of AI, it's very important to do the risk management next to that or in parallel to that. And then, of course, the output of risk management is you having the capacity. Let's say we talk about regulatory compliance. I'm deploying a digital health AI solution within the GDPR landscape or within the HIPAA landscape in the US. I need to make sure that I respect the privacy, that I can offer sufficient transparency. But I not only need to know that myself, but once I get into an audit or forbid a court case, I need to be able to prove the validation that I did. I need to be able to document it. I need to be able to generate transparency and audit reports, compliance assessment, conformity assessments. So the validation towards notified bodies or authorities is, I would say, Chris, the second dimension that needs to be taken into account. And you can do that on a governance process level and on a tooling technology level.
Outstanding answer. Thank you. Arzu, is there anything that you want to add to this discussion in regards to the value of humans in
Yeah.
this process?
Well, in the past, I also worked for European Commission. I managed the program, an AI-based research consortium. Also, I had some other tasks as well. So I came across with similar and the situations quite often. Centering AI should be always the priority. And as we always also often mention, AI is kind of the assistant for us. It's not the decision maker. So I think those two determines the framework here, in my opinion. So.
Thank you. Sergio, let's move to you. How fast do you think that AI is going to be implemented in business and strategic planning, and what are you seeing so far?
Thanks for that, Chris. And I think it ties in a little bit to what was discussed in terms of AI, augmented intelligence. If the question is, can AI replace artificial strategic executive decision making? I think the short answer is no. We know about the fallacies and the downsides of executive decision making, strategic planning. You start with a business plan for the next 3 to 5 years. Then you have an annual budget. Business unit get allocated a certain amount of resources, and then they have to basically ensure that on a periodic basis they're on track to meeting their budget. But things such as assumptions with regards to, for example, linear growth in technology, or for example, constant behavior of competitors, is part of that assumption, right? So by definition, it's very often a stale, static way of devising a strategy. And if you look at examples like Kodak, that kind of missed the digital photograph revolution, as well as, even though they didn't spot it. Or if you look at Nokia, for example, that they didn't jump on the smartphone quickly enough on the smartphone development. These are examples of static strategies that don't go back, underestimate external factors, and etc. So does that mean that AI can replace that? No, I think that AI can, in fact, by breaking it down, strategy down. Let's face it, strategy is a nuanced blend of qualitative and quantitative factors that are based on intuition, on a lot of different bits of information from different stakeholders that needs to kind of be blended together in a way that AI is simply not there yet in order to be able to automate it entirely. But if we do try to break it down into little chunks, I think that AI, and that's what we're implementing as well at this point in time, I think that AI there can really help to act as a way to neutralize cognitive biases, right? So we've all, you know, I don't mean to sound condescending here, but there's, you know, very often examples of a business leader, CEO says, look, you know, I think we should, let's go do this in that way because we've been doing this for ages, right? And the rest of the room says, you know, nods, right? This is called the sunflower bias, right? Or you have a CEO who's just, you know, done things in a certain way for the past couple of years, or for generations, continues to do it in the same way and only, you know, looks at information that confirms what they believe and discards information that what they don't believe. Right? So you're dealing with a confirmation bias. Right? I think where, in fact, AI can help. Coming back to the analogies that that we're making before is, you know, picture, I don't know, without any offense to Star Wars fans, but you know, imagine Captain Kirk, Starship Enterprise. You know, he's facing this you know, huge galaxy of, you know, loads of uncertainties, and he has to navigate and this and that. He does that on the basis of emotion, of judgment, of intuition, of experience. And then in comes AI, you know, being Spock, right? The kind of disassociated, analytical person that, or I shouldn't say person, but in any case, being that introduces a different type of, more of an overarching kind of analysis of the situation that's at hand. So how does Spock help? Spock doesn't necessarily replace Captain Kirk's judgment. No, Spock analyzes what's going on, vast amounts of data, right? And then sets out a couple of scenarios, and it's up to Captain Kirk then to decide which scenario and which path for our business is best, right? So what you get there is a harmony between artificial intelligence, and to introduce yet another abbreviation, natural intelligence, NI, okay? And I think that's where we stand at this point in time as far as AI is concerned, in a more executive strategic level. And I'll pass it on to someone else. What I think is interesting is that only 7% of leaders at this point in time use AI for strategic purposes, compared to 20-30% using it of business using it in some other kind of business discipline. So I think there's a lot of room for potential there.
Thank you, Sergio. I've got to go to you, Matthias. Sergio's hit all kinds of points that have got you smiling in a big way. Any place you want to start in particular?
Well, I just love that. I'm an absolute noob when it comes to Star Trek and those things, but I just love the analogy because I sort of pictured the live action game happening. But I really liked what Sergio was mentioning, and actually I had one of our customers articulate it in a very, very crisp way, sort of re-echoing what Sergio was mentioning about, on the one hand, you have a deeper insight. So on the one hand, you make your control over your decisions a lot deeper and a lot more granular. And on the other hand, you objectify the insights. You make sure that it's natural intelligence and augmented or artificial intelligence combined. And one of our customers explained it very easily, or in a very crisp way. He said, what AI can do is give me insights in triggers and dimensions. Or no, triggers and dynamics. Sorry, triggers and dynamics. I make a decision, and thanks to AI, I can get a much better insight into what are the triggers that could potentially force me into making a certain decision. For instance, are there global events that are happening? Am I talking about a certain region or a certain location? Am I talking about, for manufacturing, a certain type of material, a certain type of market segment, a certain type of customer, a certain season, a certain promotion? Like, what are the triggers, the variables that could influence a certain decision. And then when I get a good view of that, then I take a decision or I make a prediction. And then thanks to AI, I can get a good insight about the dynamics that my decision has caused. Because often when we're in a C-level position, we manage a company that's internationally represented. We take a decision, let's say, on our pricing strategy, on our M&A strategy. But the outcome is not directly visible. You know, the outcome might be delayed. It might be a completely different outcome based on the customer segment that you serve. Some might have higher or lower price elasticity. And so thanks to AI, you can objectify the outcome and really inspect the dynamic of what was the impact of my decision in a sort of a Rubik's Cube kind of way. I can really look at what was my impact per market, per customer segment, per product component, per region. So it's really the trigger and dynamic analogy that I wanted to give here about strategic decision making.
Pedro, I know you'd like to chime in on this as well.
Indeed. So I agree with Matthias' idea of getting more scenarios, and even for an executive that sometimes may be lonely, he or she can then get a sparring partner. But if I go on the negative sides, on the dangers, I would do a parallel with GPS navigators. I've seen too many people go in wrong ways, and I normally block them on the road and just say, oh, I was following my GPS. Yeah, but you still have a brain and you are the driver. And if you look at what's said when you switch it on, it says you are the master of this vehicle. So you need to abide by the laws. And so the comment I wanted to make is on the risks of following blindly. That's an important one. In terms of models, I talked about predictive maintenance. I worked for a large manufacturer in the past. We were testing the models. We were making predictions, so predictive failure, for example, but then we were letting it happen. We were telling our partners and customers, okay, monitor it closely. You might need to go on an emergency to replace it, but please let it fail so that we can validate the model. It's just a model, it's a probability, and we need to understand what a probability is. And we got precious data thanks to that.
Arzu, would you like to add a little something to this as well?
Yes, basically when we look at from an automation point of view, of course, it's not just AI we are talking about, but also the automation of the business processes. So we have different kind of automation components. It's this desktop workflow of automation, and then we have the process automation, which I am, of course, specialized for. And then we have the integrated version with AI. So let me explain this way. You are running a process from A to Z. So your process has multiple sections, actually. You stop somewhere, think like a bus. A bus drives on the specific road, and then it has to stop in several stations so people get in, get out. Your data is being interacted from end-to-end process, and then you want to implement AI. So how are you going to implement this AI, and why should you be implementing this AI? So first of all, you need to understand what is my processes. Is it a process that we took over from our legacy because our company is 100 years old and we used to do it this way for 50, 60 years, so we continue doing it? Well, what do I do with my processes? So that is the important part of the story, to understand what is my process. And then the second part, okay, I want to optimize my process, which Pedro was also mentioning several times about the probabilities. It doesn't necessarily mean optimization is technology-enabled optimization. It can be just simple thing. It can be that you manually need to change way of working. It can also be meaning a machine learning or AI executable that's integrated in your process. But you need to understand where you have the positive side of the story, where you can gain the value, like reducing the processing time or increasing your cash flow in that process if it is involving the financials, etc. So this holistic approach should look at into segmentation in your company, in your organization, which segments that you want to improve and what's the processes, the A-class processes in that segment. That's one thing. And second, actually talking about the value, we can't, let's put it this way, if we look at just like we want to automate or integrate with AI the simple processes, yes, that's at the start is quite important because you need to prove the value of this. You need to show that you can do this or you have a starting point. However, the real value is not just what you automate, or it's not just how many minutes that you gain, but what is the real impact that you have on your market position, actually. So in that point, it's a little bit tricky how you can measure this. So you need to have also a very good kind of self-sustaining mechanism where you can continuously check you are implementing this and you are on the right track. You need to evaluate your each step, whether I am getting the value that I have calculated for this business case. Those are the few 2 cents that I can add. Of course, there's more, but
Matthias, you have a very pragmatic approach to how you work with AI. Would you talk about that, please?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a perfect funneling out of what Atsu mentioned in really focusing on the value. And basically, when we guide companies that are having ideations about, we think we can obtain value from AI, what we focus on the innovation landscape is, okay, let's make it real, right? We can ideate for a long time, but in the end, you want to get as soon as you can to a level of pragmatic and measurable output. And basically, we follow a very simple methodology that's very universal, but I think it's worth sharing here. So again, as I think all of the speakers have iterated here in the call, is you always want to start with your objectives, your success criteria, and your KPIs. AI is not a goal. It's a means to an end. It could be a potential vehicle to help you obtain your goal. But so basically what we always start with is we do reflections about what do you want to obtain with your company, then do an assessment of what is the current skill level of your company, what does the data currently look like and your data architecture look like, and what are the areas in which you really want to obtain results, i.e. this is what we then call the use cases. For instance, if you think, hey, I think I can gain a lot from doing better price predictions or forecasting my raw material to reduce my week of stock, or to really assess fraudulent behavior in my ecosystem, whatever we reflect that think could yield us the most value, we want to document it. But then comes the most important step. Then you want to take those use cases or your ideas that are entered on your business strategy and your very tangible objectives, and you want to plot them on what we call an impact feasibility matrix. So on the one hand, you want to measure, if I would succeed in attaining my KPI for this specific use case, let's say if I want to reduce my weeks of stock with 50%, if I would obtain that, what would be the overall financial output on my company? So that would be a very high impact. But then you want to assess with the current data structure, data availability, data governance, tools, people, skill set, and time that we have, how feasible is it for me? How attainable is it for me? What would be the effort, time, and budget required to get this optimization? And you do that for the more crystallized ideas. And then you get like a nice plot of potential use cases plotted on an impact feasibility matrix. So you can clearly see these use cases would be the most strategically impactful for my company, but potentially they're very hard to achieve. Potentially they're very expensive. You need a lot of time, a lot of investments. And then you reflect together on, you might want to prioritize one of the quicker wins. You might want to prioritize something with a little bit less strategic impact, but still relevant strategic impact, but with a much higher feasibility rate. And then I come back to what I think Atsu and Pedro also mentioned, is then you want to go for the quick win. You want to make sure that you put some ambassadors around this incubation use case, go for that quick win, and then demonstrate those results across the company. The net result is that you will have gained experience, you will have adopted sponsors, you might have learned a bit about some tools and tool sets that you can use, you might have improved your data governance and data availability, and then you might be ready for the next one with a little bit higher impact, but maybe with a little bit higher investment to get there. And then you basically want to scale that step by step into a corporate strategy. So very no nonsense. No, I'm not reinventing the wheel here, but just a very tactical framework
Yes.
to prioritize.
Yeah, I wanted on this. This is one of the methodologies that we usually use. Feasibility study. We invite actually users and experts, subject matter experts from the organization, and then we ask them where do they see the value that these technologies can be used, and at the end that you have certain kind of metrics that you can just actually value this and turn to really a metric result. And you can pick up, okay, this is the best within 3 months, this is the best within 6 months. That's what I also call like, you need to have kind of like 30, 60, 90 days strategy as well, you know. So you have to correspond with your potential use cases within that concept. And that's a typical way. Also, like design thinking that we also often use, of course, from ideation to scaled up MVPs. But these are all the methodologies. You can try what is best, which one suits best in your culture. Another thing that I can actually propose is kind of like joint design authority, or kind of the task force within your organization, where you can have delegations from different kind of business departments, and each one of them is kind of the representative of coming with the ideas from their service lines or from their departments. So then you can also harvest more, and they also will likely feel kind of ownership in this story, so they will become your evangelists at the end. So, thank you.
Let's go to Pedro. Pedro, who should be responsible for AI from your standpoint in an organization?
Well, it depends. If you look at AI from a strategy and business perspective, whether you look at it from from a technological implementation perspective, or from a corporate responsibility perspective. Yeah. So for the first one, it will be the executive committee. For the last one, it will be the technology department, but hopefully with interacting with the different functions in the company. And for the last one, it should be the board. So hence, as I mentioned before, make sure what you're shooting, especially outside, because you may be held accountable for it. But from that perspective, that's no different with AI or any other action. Like Arzu was saying, there are things that don't require technology, right? You could write a letter on a piece of paper, and if you happen to use the bad words and send it to a customer or to authorities, you could be in big trouble.
Thank you. From your perspective, Matthias, how do you farm out and who is responsible for AI throughout your organization?
I think I very much echo what Pedro mentioned here. I potentially, let me answer this in two different ways. For me, there's another dimension that we could put into place. So I like the structure that Pedro put in place. Another way of looking at it is on a strategy level. If the company is still in what we call an incubation phase, where AI is being tested for a very specific use case, for instance, the logistics manager or whoever within a company says, hey, I think I might get some benefits from employing a very specific tool set to yield these results, we still call that isolated incubation. And there it's data, it's IT, it's a logistics manager or the BU director itself. Then you might scale to different incubations, which is good because you will be seeing benefits. But then comes a challenge. Just like in the past, we had what we called an IT sprawl. We had a little bit of our data there and a little bit of our cloud there, and it became tough to manage, and they wouldn't talk to each other, and my security patches wouldn't go on. Now people are struggling with an AI sprawl. Is if I use a point solution vendor to improve my demand, and then I use a point solution vendor to scan my claim documents, and in the end, I have an AI sprawl. I have different vendors, different SLAs, different contracts, different data repositories. How do I manage this going forward? So at the moment that strategically as a company, you decide that I want to really, as a company, become data-driven, and I want to have a strategic plan on how to ingest data-driven intelligence across my business units, that's when the decision responsibility goes up into the stack, right? That's when you go to the C-level that really needs to foster it, generate awareness, and lay out a strategy. The second dimension that I would like to touch upon here is a little bit more on the micro level. You mentioned corporate responsibility about AI, but I would quickly like to touch on an interesting dynamic, which is a singular AI solution. We want to put in place an AI solution. Let's say we're very active in healthcare, so I want to have a hyper-personalized AI solution to personalize a care path for a certain patient, or to improve drug treatment adherence, to improve the health outcome of a certain patient. Just any type of personalization use case. In the past, it would be the business. It could be clinical experts that would talk to the AI or data team and say, hey, this is what I want. The AI and data team would then work on their ideas, and in the end, they would throw it back over the wall and say, hey, here's what we built. And then business would say, no, it's not what I wanted. Ping pongs back and forth. And then all the way at the end of the development cycle, there's an MVP. And then we want to put the MVP in production. Then it goes to IT, and IT says, whoa, this is going to cost way too much on our cloud compute. And then it goes to legal, and legal says, hey, you didn't take into account that we need to comply with this very specific regulation, and the whole build process takes a very long time. And now coming back to responsibility, the future will have to be a more collaborative way of AI, where all stakeholders at the beginning of the design process, I know Atsu mentioned design thinking, at the beginning of the design process, articulate their needs. Business, clinical people say, this is what we need. IT says, hey, take into account these compute restrictions. Legal says you will be need to comply to HIPAA or GDPR or EU AI Act or a specific act. And we need to document it in the beginning. And those are then the stakeholders that become responsible for generating the BRD or business requirement document for a specific solution. So that's also, I think, an important trend for the audience to take into account, is that AI needs to be collaborative, and current upcoming regulations also stimulate that idea, that all stakeholders need to be able to input their objectives and requirements, and they need to be able to see the impact on their objectives in the final audit report. So coming back to our expertise on regulations and governance, that's a very important decision-making modality that is changing going forward.
Artsu, you look like you've got something you want to add there.
Yes, actually, this is like a very good point. The biggest struggle that companies are confronting when they are busy with any type of digital transformation component is their IT department, who is not very collaborative, right? I think the best is, in my opinion, based on really my years of experience, if it is an enterprise organization that you are trying to implement AI, the best is to involve your architects, enterprise architects, if you have, or the business architects, or whomever actually is the person who knows this strategic roadmap about your organization, and also the IT components, etc. Who is this bridging person in your organization between IT and the business? From the start, and involve your IT department, because at the end, they need to got something that you're implementing, you know. Of course, the business departments own the data, they own the applications. However, guarding is in their IT department. So it's very important, in my opinion, to involve them, get their opinion and learn about the possibilities, how they're actually this technical infrastructure, the architecture in the company is settled at the moment, because there can be really some difficulties. You may think that it's very simple, but it may not be that simple at the end. For that reason, it's best to involve them from the scratch. So,
great point. Let's move to use cases. And Pedro, let's talk about, from your standpoint, predictive maintenance through machine learning and how AI has been helpful in that, in your experience.
So not only on my experience, but what the analysts, let's say the Gartners, the McKinseys, and all those people say in terms of digital business transformation and IoT services, predictive maintenance is the most widespread use case. I don't know if they were able to link it with revenues or savings or something like that, but it's true that I would say, as far as I'm aware, this would be the broadest usage of AI, not generative AI, but of AI in the world, to my knowledge. And it's true that it needs to be a collaborative effort, because like we were saying, and Arzu was highlighting sometimes the difficulties with the IT department, which are true, but are also understandable, because we keep talking about the holistic view and the strategic view. And so they also need to have that holistic view and strategic view, because they are interacting with and struggling with conflicting demand from different departments. And I want this, and now when my business is crucial and it's revenue generating, so you need to do it. And they need to make sense out of it for the good of the company. And those predictive maintenance go across all industries. I mean, if you go in life science, and you have everything that has to do with diagnostics as one example. So we make remote patient monitoring, but also the machines that produce the drugs that are given to patients, anything to do with logistics, moving goods, big cranes in harbors, airplanes. It's not so common yet. There's glimpses of it on automotive. This was actually the first use case I also like to talk about in terms of use cases, because it's easier to understand. The first use case I ever in IoT was actually in India, talking to an audience, a mix of a business and technical audience of Alcatel-Lucent in their R&D centers in Bangalore and Chennai. And there's a lot to do to improve our lives as users of cars and motorbikes and what have you, that has not been exploited or explored, perhaps due to lack of a proper business model. So we come back at it. The business model, the strategy is key.
Thank you. Matthias, before we come to you in regards to a use case, I want to just encourage anybody, if you have questions that you'd like to cover, please get them in the chat, and we'll try and wrap up with that as soon as we get a little feedback from Matthias on his use case in regards to more personalized healthcare. Matthias?
Sure. I was reading an extensive comment in the chat here, but we'll get back to that in a second.
Yeah, I'm also reading it.
So on a general level, I always try not to overcomplicate things when we look at use cases. It's always the magic triangle, right? Either Either it's money, it's time, or risk. So use cases always orient either we want to reduce our costs or increase and find new revenue streams. We want to improve our time to value or time to market, and we want to reduce risk. So it's about impact. When I look at one of the industries in which we're very active, or we're active across a broad spectrum of industries, but there you see a trend that's very explicit in a lot of industries, but it's very outspoken in healthcare. It's basically the transformation from a classic static business model to hyper-personalized, continuous, and proactive service delivery. And that's a trend that you see in healthcare. That's a trend that you see in banking. That's a trend that you see in insurance and in HR, is really that transformation of business model. When you talk about healthcare, it's really about lowering the cost of care, personalizing the impact towards the individual struggling with a disease, and making healthcare accessible, more accessible for different people. So that's really one of the key trends that we see in healthcare, is that shift in business model. And then, of course, if you double click on that, then that drills down to a lot of different potential use cases, which is personalized content recommendations, personalized prescriptions, personalized diagnosis, the generation of a personalized care path for a given disease, but also more operational use cases like the demand planning for certain drugs in certain areas, accessibility studies, creating impacts on diversity and non-discrimination, because a lot of the ethics code in healthcare, a lot of the diagnostics devices and medication is still tested on a very limited subset of the population, and might not be as effective on different ethnicities, etc. So those are just some of the ideas that we play with specifically in the health industry, but I think it's important to just understand that it always comes down to the magic triangle of impact, which is cost, time to market, and risk mitigation.
Yeah, I can give another example actually. Can I, Chris? Because Matthias is talking about regulation and the compliance part of the story. So I think it's one of the best example in regarding to regulation itself is if your company, if your organization is active, is kind of in the industry where it's a regulated industry, what we call, like healthcare is one of the examples, can be public institutions, or it can be financial services and something similar. So like the regulations and compliance, they keep changing, right? They're frequently being updated. So there are multiple regulations that a company has to comply for. So this is the part where you can actually start using AI. So you can harvest the changes from multiple sources in the market, because likely you are not getting that updated information from one source, but from many sources. It can be somewhere that way you have the abundance and you are getting the information. It can be something published on the internet in the public documents of European Union or your country's government. So this is where it starts. You can actually harvest this information from internet, and then by using NLP, a trained model, you can basically filter out if this is a really update that I'm looking for, and then what is the relevant, and then you can also even compare this with what you already know in-house. And then you can, with other automation components like with RPA or similar, distribute within your organization to the right people, what we call like the members of your task force in that regulation area. So this story can, of course, go on, but this is one of the simplest, actually the most simple example of AI use case.
Yes, I just because I really love this subject to ask, so I just want to add a little bit onto what you're saying, because I really love this narrative. So we focus a lot on regulated industries and the integration of the innovation lifecycle with the risk management lifecycle. And what Artso, I think, very perfectly described as AI can really help you on automating, staying up to date with regulations and understanding regulatory changes, and make sure that you ingest those changes into your knowledge base, into your task force to then implement them. And then you have basically always an up-to-date repository of what do I need to comply with regulatory-wise. And then just the last 2 cents that I would like to add to that is then comes the challenge of how to operationalize that in a dynamic and a continuous manner without always have to go manually into your code. And that's some of the areas that's a really interesting focus area is when you talk about ethics frameworks, when you talk about regulatory and privacy frameworks, there is understanding what you have to do, which you can perfectly automate with AI. And then there's the other side of the equation is then how do you actually operationalize that into your system? And that's where a whole new field of risk-aware and compliant AI is emerging. And that's a very interesting intersection to discuss. So I like that addition, Artsu. I just wanted to add the operationalization.
Yeah.
I think I made it.
Great job. Great job, everybody. We're going to try and get in a couple of questions before we wrap up. And I want to start with Dan R. Thank you so much for your feedback. We're all appreciative of it. You asked 2 questions. Most companies are still contemplating how to deal with this. Well, we're close to GPT-5, which is at our doorstep, and AGI is expected to arrive before the end of the decade. How are we going to keep up with all of this? Anybody want to start with that one?
Yeah, sure. It's like so that's the beauty of technology. I mean, as an engineer by training, on one hand, I love it. On the other hand, and that's why I distinguish technology, what it can do for us at a high level, and again, linking it what it can do for us from a strategy execution and business value. But then there's a lower layer, which is the technical layer, which I'll leave to the younger folks that can deal with that and are. But there's a problem of, well, we don't change the laws of physics, of signal to noise ratio. There's a lot of noise. And there's a question of being able to extract the signal from that, the signal being what we can benefit from it. And then the second part of your question, the hardware keeping up. So the reason why NVIDIA and perhaps AMD will be successful in the future, well, NVIDIA is being successful right now, is that they use GPUs, graphical processor units. And the main difference between a classical CPU from Intel or even from AMD is that they have been programmed for threading and parallel computing. So that's how it will keep up. But and I started my career on the telecoms and networks worlds. There is always a bottleneck, whether it's on the network or on the host, as we call them, so the servers, etc. There is a moving bottleneck. So, but again, as we were discussing the other day with, well, I was commenting to Arzu as she's the big data lady. I say, well, big data is often a problem because you may have too much data. Smart data is what brings the value. So don't process everything for the sake of it. Do it on quote unquote paper or reasoning. What is it that you need to do before rushing to implement and harness all garbage that could drop by you?
Excellent answer. We have 3 minutes left, and I want to get in one last question from Jill, who's a medical device industry consultant. Do you feel the regulatory bodies have the capacity to determine the risks of an application? For example, I've seen a startup looking to replace psychoanalysts with an AI app. Anybody want to jump on this one? I feel like, Matthias, you're probably the most qualified to talk about this since well-being is a big piece of your focus.
I already quickly answered in the chat. So I think there is regulations in place. There's MDR in Europe. There's FDA approval or medical device under FDA regulations within the US. And I do think that they cover, I even think that in Europe, the regulation is very strict in order for you to either use software, including AI as a medical device. So regulatory bodies are definitely ring fencing and boxing in the restrictions into that field, specifically in medical cases, even to a point that it becomes challenging to innovate within the health industry. So a lot of digital health startups fail to go beyond MVP because of the very stringent MDR type of regulations. So it's a very sorry, I'm following the chat as we go. It's a very intricate balance that you need to strike between securing your innovation, accompanying all the processes that you need for compliance, of which the MDR submission or the MDR regulation submission is one, but then making sure that at the same time you architect your solution, so the software of the medical device and the AI algorithm underneath it, in a way that it can scale with you. So the whole scalability part, and what's the wiggle room that I have to grow within my solution before I have to submit a re-authentication. That's a very delicate point. That's often being discussed. So going into the weeds on this will take us beyond the minute that we have left. But I think this is definitely something that we can circle back to. I just hope that I was able to give a little bit of frame there.
Plus, I wonder if there's a bit of a mismatch, because talking about a medical device to replace a psychoanalyst, not sure it completely makes sense at all, just in terms of common sense.
But there is this, around year 2019 in Europe, we had an update on the regulatory part of the healthcare system. Notified bodies who are responsible for this authentication of the applications have to go through all these products of the startups. That's the challenge started actually for the healthcare industry in Europe. And indeed, it kind of downgraded our innovation in healthcare in Europe. I can't talk about United States though, but I know from European point, this was not the best thing. But on the other hand, it is still a best thing, because there should be a complete transparency what these startups are doing, who are behind the processes in their applications and in their products, because it was not always very clear. Like what Pedro was pointing out, you are giving a medical advice. Who is behind it? What is exactly going on behind that service? From this point, European Union picked this up and changed the regulation. So you need to be transparent. That's what I believe. That's the most important part. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We've got to wrap it up. We're a minute over. I want to thank the audience for being here. Our sense is that you found it valuable. I want to thank, first of all, Mateus for being here, Pedro Paiva, Arzu Barkske, and our sponsor today who made sure this happened, Sergio Van Looyk. I'm Chris Templeton. Thank you so much, and we look forward to your feedback. I'm going to put up the slide with all of our contact information. Please feel free to get in contact with us. We'd appreciate it. Have a good day, everyone, and thank you so much for being here.